In the Field updates on Market Journal are supported by the Nebraska Corn Board. Back in 2017, Wheat Stem Maggot caused significant damage to several cornfields around Nebraska. This summer, some producers and crop consultants in areas of the state have been dealing with young corn plants being impacted by Wheat Stem Maggot once again. Market Journal recently caught up with a Nebraska Extension educator to learn more about how this could be impacting your fields.
Yeah, here's like another, oh man, that plant's almost normal minus the fact that this has come off, but look at how big those leaves are, and you know, a tiller coming out on that one. Well, you know, to start with this issue, you probably have to go back a decade or so, when Wayne Onesor started seeing corn plants that their main stem was not growing. In fact, they looked like they'd been destroyed. Something had killed the main part of that plant, the new and emerging whorl. And so that was over a decade ago, and then about 8 years ago, this issue happened again, but over a much more widespread area. We went out and did a survey of about 13 fields in mostly the south central part of the state, and gathered a lot of information on what on earth was going on that Wheat Stem Maggot would be showing up and damaging corn. And it turns out from that survey, a lot of what we were seeing was wheat or rye cover crops terminated after planting. So they were green planting their corn into a cover crop, and the maggots were on the cover crop. That's not unusual in Wheat Stem Maggot. It's normally on wheat, rye, and oats. But because this host was killed, it had nowhere to go. And so it moved off the wheat or rye cover crops and onto the corn to complete its development. And they were all different sizes when we did the survey in terms of the larval size, but they were all feeding in that growing point of that plant, killing the inner leaf, the emerging leaf that was there. So it was a troubling situation because there was plants that were stunted and way behind in producing tillers, and some normally developing plants. But one of the critical things we found in this survey that is really important to everybody who's potentially managing this pest is that we didn't find Wheat Stem Maggot infestations outside of where the cover crop was growing. So it had to be within about 1 foot to 2 feet of where a cover crop plant was growing. And so you'd say, oh, okay, so what? But it's really important to the fact that adults are not the source of infestation, that it was larval movement from the cover crop that caused infestation in the corn. And so we're seeing a repeat of that this year in quite a number of fields across the state. And then right in the next row, just 2 feet away, they look perfect. There's one plant right there. And that's it. There's not much to be done right now. I know some producers are discussing and consultants are discussing or using an insecticide, trying to kill them in the whorls of the corn plant. And I would say there's a couple reasons why we don't probably want to do that. First is we're not likely to save the corn plants that are already infested. And second, if the goal is to prevent new infestations, they're not likely to occur if they're already in the corn. So the insect's only likely to move if the host dies. So it's likely to complete its development within the corn plant it's in. The third item is that there's a lot of beneficial insects out there in these systems, and if we apply insecticides to that system, we can wipe them out, and then we can potentially get secondary pest issues that can be kind of problematic. And they might find themselves back out there when they don't want to be controlling some other pest. As we've heard anywhere from low infestations of 11%, 5%, or 1%, all the way up to 50 to 60%. Those 50 to 60%, those growers are struggling with what do I do with this crop? Do I terminate the crop and replant? Some are just replanting. They don't, it looks too bad to them to consider leaving it in the field. What we learned from 2017 survey was that these tillered plants, if they produce a tiller, that's a productive tiller. So most people, what they know of tillers when they think about corn growth and development is a tiller is something that's wasted at the end of the season. It produces a tassel ear, so there's nothing covering the ear and the ears are diseased. But in this case, they actually produced normal ears. And so it's not the full yield potential that existed in that field for that plant, but it's close enough that those plants should be considered part of the live count as they're moving through. We have another people reporting they're not seeing tiller development, and that's probably where the research comes in, is we need to follow these plants pretty closely and see if they all tiller or don't tiller, and what phenotypes or visual symptoms do we have now that may not lead to tillering. And that, hopefully this never happens again, although things have repeated themselves already. But if they do repeat themselves, we'd have a much better guideline to that replant decision in terms of, if my plants look like this, I count them as part of my total. If they look like this, I don't, and I can work on my replants and patches or whatever else. If some of them are on the fence and those lower numbers, I'd say let those fields continue, because you're going to have losses on the replant date. That's just inevitable to corn being planted later. That's why we planted so early. But if you're in that 50 to 60%, you're not seeing tillering, I think that's justifiable that you move into a replant if your populations are low enough.